Hello and welcome to Twin Talk. I'm Angie and I'm here with my sister Joy. And today we're going to be discussing the book Educated. So Educated is a memoir by Tara Westover and it was written in 2018. So Joy, you're the person that introduced me to this book and I'm glad you did. I thought it was a very interesting book. What's your overall impression of the book?
The book was fascinating. Like, I did not want to quit listening to it. I'm like, it was the word that kept coming to me over and over was, this is fascinating stuff, that this is true, this really happened here in the United States.
Yeah, same here. I was like, this is the most it was one of those books, like you hear they'll turn. It was a page turner.
It's definitely a page turner.
It was one of those books that every time I got a free moment, I was like, oh, I want to listen to it.
Same here. Yeah. I probably finished it in 2 or 3 days, if I remember correctly.
It was absolutely fascinating, unforgettable. I'll never forget her story. At the same time, the reason it was fascinating was because it was so tragic.
And yes, it's a very tragic story, but it has a happy ending.
I'll never forget.
In some ways.
You were like you were reading it or listening to it, and I remember you called me one day and you were like, Angie, this is the best book, but I just want to warn you, it's about abuse.
Yeah.
You said I didn't realize that this a lot of this was about abuse.
I had no clue what the book was even about. It was just on our teen read list at the school where I work, and I know that our librarian puts a lot of thought into every book, and every book on the list she's researched and it's won awards, or there's every one of them are good. So I knew it was going to be good. I just didn't know what it was about.
Okay, so we'll read a real quick summary of it. So if you'll just read what's that right there, that's the summary of it.
Okay, Educated is an autobiographical account that follows the life of Tara Westover, a young girl born in rural Idaho to Mormon survivalist. The memoir is divided into 3 parts. Part 1 focuses on Tara's early childhood in Bucks Peak, a rural and isolated community. Tara is the youngest of 7 children. Her father, referred to under the pseudonym Gene, runs a metal scrapyard on their property. Faye, quote-unquote, Tara's mother, is an herbalist, midwife, and healer. Tara discusses how her mother began her career as a midwife, and she also recounts a terrible car accident that caused her mother to sustain a serious brain injury.
Okay, so...
Sorry, I think I read a little more than I was supposed to.
Oh, I just wanted you to read the highlighted part.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, it's all right. But no, that's good, because that's good that you read all that. So basically, you've got a formula here of Mormon survivalists. So what's not interesting about that?
Yeah. And I do want to point out, and I went to school, one of my roommates in college was a Mormon, and I'm glad that Tara said this at the beginning of the book. She's saying this is not common of Mormons. It's her dad had a mental illness. He was bipolar. They're pretty sure he's bipolar. And it has nothing to do with them being Mormon. It's more about the mental illness and the brainwashing that went on with the dad.
Yeah. At the very beginning of the book, so typically, sometimes I guess in books they'll kind of have like a little introduction, or they'll maybe credit people who helped him write the book. So at the beginning, I don't know if you remember, but she reads this long list of names that the following names in the book are not these people's real names.
Yeah.
Well, and it didn't occur to me till halfway through the book, oh, there's a reason why she's not giving real names in this book.
Because, buddy, she had a very abusive brother, a very abusive dad, and in a way her mom just turned a blind eye to all the abuse. And when she wrote this book, she didn't hold back. She told exactly what it was and who did what and when, and that's why she had to use pseudonyms for their names, because I'm sure she knew there'd be backlash.
Yeah. So, to me, one of the most fascinating things was the fact that she grew up in a scrapyard.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not a typical... I know there's a lot of children who have grown up that way in their life, but... having a crazy father and growing up in a scrapyard, that's a little different.
It was almost a deadly combination because they were homeschooled, which really, according to Tara, it was pretty much non-existent. They said they were homeschooling, but there really wasn't much schooling going on, depending on who you talk to. But so the dad would make the sons, and of course Tara would make them work in the scrapyard, and because he wasn't mentally there. He put them into dangerous situations all the time. There was
Mm-hmm.
always somebody getting hurt. And we're
Yeah.
not talking minor cuts and scratch.
Right.
We're talking brain injuries.
Like
We're
someone
talking,
lost part of a finger one time.
yes,
And,
we're talking people getting crushed and people
yeah.
getting mutilated. I mean, this is not little stuff. This is like almost dying type stuff.
Yeah, and for her to be such a young girl in this environment, that part just absolutely blew my mind.
Yeah.
Now, of all her siblings, she had a brother named Tyler, and in the book, he kind of didn't really fit in. He stuttered. He had a stutter when he talked. And
Yeah.
anyway, he actually moves off to go to Brigham Young University. And when he leaves, I think that's the point when Tara starts to really feel alone. And she just she starts to feel kind of isolated once he leaves, because he
and
was
he's
like,
the first person that even put the idea into her head that it was possible to go to school. He's the one that said, hey, you can go to college. And she's like, what? I haven't even been to school. And he says, all you have to do
yeah,
is...
she's like, I haven't even been to high school.
Yeah, and he explains to her, hey, as long as you can pass this ACT and get a certain score, you can get into college. And that's when she begins to study for the ACT.
Yeah, and actually we're getting ready to talk about that, because that part to me was fascinating.
Yeah.
So but here's the meat of the story to me. This was just horrifying to me. But as she turns into a teenager, she begins to be physically and psychologically abused by her older brother, Sean, which that's not his real name. And the book talks a lot about the different times that he physically abused her.
Yes,
and it was just
physically
it was
and
awful.
mentally. Calling her
Yes.
every name in the book.
Yeah, and so I don't really know if we really want to get into, let's just as an example, he would take her arm and twist it behind her back to the point where she literally thought her arm was going to break.
Yeah, and I think he did break it one time.
He would, and he knew he had taken some type of form of, some type of martial arts or something. So he knew all these maneuvers.
Yes,
and
he knew all the
how
pressure points.
He knew how to subdue people and put you at his will and his mercy.
He would take her head and shove it into the toilet. And
were you wondering where the mom was?
yes,
during all
that's
this?
why. Okay, honestly, yeah, I can't stand the brother, and he's abusive. Here's the thing: the dad was abusive in that he was always putting her in dangerous situations. And oh my gosh, she described 2 horrific car wrecks that were both really the dad's fault. Horrific, people almost getting killed. But what made me so angry was, that the mom saw and heard a lot of the stuff that was going on and never stepped in to do anything about it.
So later in the story, there is I don't know if you remember, there's a passage where she finds her mother crying in the bathroom, and she there's a little revelation, just a glimpse of her mom kind of spilling out all the abuse that she's had to endure over the years because of her husband, who's this, manic depressive.
I think the mom could see what was going on, but she was too scared and so busy. They had so many kids. I think she was so busy and so scared and so intimidated by her husband that she just turned a blind eye.
And I felt like she was brainwashed.
Yes.
The whole family was brainwashed to some extent by the dad.
They would always take... Behind his back, they would take Tara's side sometimes.
Yes.
But in front of him,
And the
they were
mom
taking
would
his
always
side.
take her side, but the minute he was in the picture, she would backpedal and change her story every time.
It just shows how manipulated and how scared they were.
Yes, yeah, and he was just such a force to be reckoned with that it was easier to go along with him than it was to oppose him.
And another thing was always because God said this or God said that. So he would use that to prick their conscience. Well, if God really told Dad that, or if, he's supposedly the dad claimed to be this godly man, and he would get revelations from God. Well, obviously not.
They all looked up to him and respected him.
Yes,
it was almost like he was a prophet.
Yes, he's almost treated like a prophet.
And because of that, they never questioned his methods, which were horrible.
To me, that's what weighed in so heavily. If it had just been a mentally ill father, but the fact he would add God to the scenario, then they're like, wait, what if God really is telling him to do this or telling him to do that, or that she's constantly being told she's evil.
He always claimed to have a front row seat with God, like like he was telling him, and he's so humbled that he got the revelation.
Yes.
But the one telling thing in the book to me was when she said, when Dad was talking, everyone had to shut up, be still, and listen. But when anyone else talked, he wouldn't listen.
Yeah.
He never listened to anyone else. But you had to be reverent quiet while he was talking, but not the other way around.
Yes. What's the word when someone's only about themselves?
Oh, narcissist.
Yes,
he was very.
He was a
he
big
was
time narcissist. Yeah.
So,
but I think the biggest thing that struck me was not only was she dealing with, well, my dad says it, but God, he says that God's saying to do this or God's saying that, and so that was a part of the brainwashing.
Yeah, and here she was only like 14 or so, and she had never been taught anything about the facts of life. And then she has her brother Sean, the abuser, telling her, you're going to turn into a slut. You're going to turn into this. And she didn't even know what that meant.
No.
But yet she's being psychologically abused for something she didn't know what they were talking about.
Yeah, she's constantly being told that she's a bad person. And he would go and say people downtown are talking about her mom and dad, and just it was horrific, the things that she had to
he called
go
her
through.
every name under the book, and she was not even guilty of the things he was accusing her of.
She was very innocent of these things.
Yeah, so naturally, she kind of, after a while, after all the abuse and this, she's living in this toxic home with her dad and her brother and her mom. It was just the perfect storm, But so she finally realizes she needs to get out of there, and she starts kind of listening to her brother's advice about going to college. And Joy, I know you'll agree with me on this. She takes the ACT and gets a 28.
Was that the first time that she took it?
I know. I believe the first time she got like a 26 or something.
Okay.
I don't remember.
This is where it's been a while since I've read it.
But, I mean, the fact that she ended up with the 28 blows my mind.
I thought she got a 20 the first time, which would have been amazing, never having gone to school.
Yeah.
I think she went to school for a few months in the fourth grade.
I think her high score was a 28.
I think after studying, and she took the test several times, I believe.
So I won't even mention what mine was. Okay, here I went to school, kindergarten through 12th grade, and she basically occasionally would find an old school book to read out of the basement, and the girl gets a 28 on her
And
ACT.
she did study her behind off. She does say she studied hard and it was mainly the math part. She said she
taught herself trigonometry and algebra.
She taught herself trigonometry.
I'm like,
and her dad was a genius at math.
Yes.
He could come to all these really complicated mathematical equations. He just didn't know kind of the method to how he got there.
That was one of the most interesting parts of the book to me. Was there was a passage where her mom and her worked on a trigonometry problem for ever. I forget.
For 2 or 3 days.
For like 2 or 3 days, they were trying to work on a problem. The dad, they said, he walks in the room and she says, "Dad, do you know the answer to this?" And he sits and looks at it and kind of visually, he scribbles a few things on the paper, and then he's like, "Here, this is the answer." Well, the answer he wrote was correct.
He didn't know how he got it.
He didn't know how he got it, but it was the correct answer.
So he was a smart guy when it came to math.
I do believe that because of a lot of his kids were very successful later in life, in their scholarly success, I don't know what I'm trying to say. But anyway, I do believe he was a very smart man.
Yeah, I believe that both parents were smart and passed it down to their kids. They just didn't get to, because they weren't educated very much throughout their childhood, they just didn't get to reach their fullness until later, their potential.
Okay, so basically she passes the ACT, and even though she's never graduated high school, and that part was fuzzy to me. I'm like, how do you get into Brigham Young
without... Do they not look at your high school diploma? I have no idea. I know that the ACT is a major factor.
Yeah, I thought that was the only thing about the book that was fuzzy to me. Yeah. I was thinking, okay, I understand that you passed the ACT.
Like she said she had to forge a few papers.
Oh, maybe that's what it was.
But yeah, I'm thinking usually they look at your GPA and your ACT score, depending on the college. I don't know.
But nevertheless, she ends up at Brigham Young University, and then it talks about what a difficult time she has adjusting, because she's living with these roommates, and they're all, in her eyes, very worldly. She grew up very, very, very sheltered. Of course, she felt like because they she mentioned something about one of the girls had on. Oh, I'll never forget. The girl had on like a pair of shorts or sweats, and it said "juicy" on the back. And she was appalled. That girl would be wearing that, but
because she usually dressed like a boy.
Yeah, she would
wear boys' baggy jeans, loose.
She was encouraged to anything that might show your shape or your figure would have been sinful in the eyes of her family.
Yes.
Yeah. So she does begin dating a boy named Charles in the town. And it talks about after college she does go home for a summer vacation, and she works in the scrapyard to make a little money that summer. But while she's at home, her brother starts abusing her again. Well, this time I believe it was over Thanksgiving break, her boyfriend actually witnesses her brother abusing her, and he begs her to report it, and she won't do it.
I know.
So she's
That's
caught.
something I think that people who have never been abused don't understand, because they say that's very common for people who are abused to not want to report the abuser to the police or whoever. They always feel like, well, it's partly my fault. They say
Yeah.
it's very common for the person who was abused to feel somewhat responsible, like they deserve the abuse. And I don't remember how she felt about it,
Well,
but why in the world she would not report her brother?
But the
I don't
way
understand.
and it was fascinating to me the way she described her abusive encounters with her brother was almost as if she was on the outside watching it happen. It
it's
was almost like she,
it's almost like she left her body,
almost like an out of body experience where
Yes.
it was like a coping mechanism because she couldn't deal with it.
Yeah.
So
And I don't understand why she even went home on breaks and things, because he basically threatened to kill her several times, and her boyfriend even attested, like, I've even read something on the internet where he said, I was there on the phone when he was calling and he's threatened to kill her many times.
Yeah.
So, and I know she wants to see her family, but I think if I knew I had a brother who lived right there who was going to, and who she knows he's capable of some pretty horrible things.
Yeah.
And he's threatened to kill her several times. Why in the world
there
she's
is something
going
that's
home?
coming up we're going to talk about
Okay.
that you're talking about.
And what
but,
makes it worse is that the parents don't, or they just laugh at, they just kind of brush it under the rug. Oh, he wasn't being serious. Oh, he doesn't really mean it.
They refuse to see what's really happening right before their eyes. Like everything's
They would never, ever admit.
It was like he's
or
the golden
believe
child.
that he would be abusive. If he
Yeah.
said anything, oh, he's just being funny. He's just kidding around.
Right. If they didn't actually see something happen, they always took his side over Tara.
Yeah.
Always. And then another big climax in the story, which we don't really have time to get into, but her father is in a really horrible accident. Basically, something catches fire and explodes in the junkyard, and it's almost like half his face was blown off. It wasn't
Yeah,
that
he
bad,
had
but
major,
a lot of
major
his
burns.
skin was burnt, and part of his lips were melted off. Well, they don't believe in hospitals, so he goes home, and the mom basically keeps him alive just by a string. He's barely alive. There's several days they really don't think he's going to make it, but of course they don't believe in hospitals, and his mom, the herbalist, is treating him with herbs and things, and of course when it's all said and done he survives, and he what was it he said? That it was through his pain, God was using his pain to speak to others.
Yeah.
Or it was something that didn't really make sense.
He uses it as a platform to tell others about God and how
Yeah.
how those essential oils and things like that saved his life. And
And
God, of course,
and
he gives God
ironically, this is to me the most ironic part of the story was her mom actually becomes very, very successful. She ends up having a huge business where they sell
essential
herbs
oils
and essential oils, and they become pretty wealthy off of
they
it.
actually become pretty wealthy. Yeah.
So that's life's kind of weird at times, isn't it? But anyway, so she basically she went back to BYU, and this part's everything about this book's fascinating. So
Yeah.
at this point, she finds out she's been accepted to Cambridge University, and
Through
I'm
like a
like,
study abroad program or something.
yeah. So she gets to go abroad, and it's an exchange program. And I never did, but I wanted to Google pictures of Cambridge because she was describing some of the buildings where I was thinking, oh, of course I'd have been in heaven in Cambridge.
Absolutely, yeah. It sounds beautiful.
Yeah, but she got to be just, and the whole time, of course, she's admitting, here I am, like a fish out of water. I feel like I'm the last person that should be here, but there she is, And while she's there, she develops a really close relationship with a professor, and I don't mean anything
Nothing inappropriate.
but
More like a father figure.
Yeah, he truly sees that she's got all this potential, and he encourages her to return to Cambridge for graduate school. And then she is awarded the Gates Scholarship. Well, the Gates Scholarship, as you know, is a very prestigious scholarship. And she got to study at Trinity College.
Yeah.
So in the last part of the book, basically she returns home for the holidays, and she learns that Sean's new wife is now the victim of Sean's violent abuse. Surprise, surprise, right?
And she tried. Didn't she try to warn her not to marry him? And she's like, and the girlfriend says, well, he's just very close to God, and he struggles more than most men because
Yeah.
he's been called by God.
Somehow she was making excuses
Yes,
for him.
basically because he's been called by God to do great things, he must suffer more, and he's more. Basically, he's a complicated man, but I'm going to forgive him all the abuse because he's going to be a great man who's going to do great things, or something to that effect.
And it was at this point, you've already mentioned this, but it was at this point when she's over at Cambridge that Sean basically starts saying things like he wants to kill her sister Audrey, because they find out that he had also, Audrey's her older sister who he had abused in the past. Tara did not know this until she was in college, that Audrey finally admits that
and then Audrey backpedals and said, no. Once Audrey starts feeling the heat from the mom and dad and Sean, she's like, oh no, I didn't say that.
The part of the book that I literally wanted to just choke her father was when she finally confronts her parents after all these years and says, he abused me all these years, he's abused Audrey, and now he's abusing his wife. And guess what the dad says? Show me proof. I have to have proof. Just give me some proof.
Yeah,
and I'm thinking, it was like
Mm-hmm.
in his mind, he couldn't just believe what his daughter told him. He had to see it, And then, okay, this is the part that absolutely blew my mind. There was an evening, I guess, when they wanted him to come over so they could discuss these allegations that Tara had said. They find out later, she looks out in the yard or something, and she sees his German Shepherd, or I don't remember if it was a German Shepherd, it was a dog, his dog, dead. He had stabbed it multiple times.
Yeah. I think he was so angry that Tara had accused him of abuse to the parents that he got so angry that he went out and stabbed his beloved dog.
Violently, and then he later tells the parents, I did it because he wouldn't quit bothering the chickens.
Yeah, he was killing the chickens.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, there's a much more humane way to kill a dog than stabbing it to death.
And when he comes in and sits down by Tara on the couch after he's brutally murdered his dog, he slips the bloody knife into her hand. And to me, that was like...
in front of the parents. Yeah. And they don't even blink an eye.
And they don't even think nothing of it.
I know, that just shows you how warped they are.
She's literally sitting there shivering and shaking on the couch. She's so terrified of this maniac. And the parents are like, like I'm thinking, he just slipped a bloody knife into her hand, and she's just telling you that the guy's crazy and he's threatening to kill her and her sister.
And they refuse to believe her.
That no matter what it was, they refused to believe her.
The part that got to me, and that was probably the worst part, you're right, where he killed his dog with a knife, but where he got angry at his wife, and they had a newborn baby, and he got angry about, she brought home the wrong type of chips or something ridiculous.
Something stupid,
He kicks her out of the trailer, locks the door where she can't back in. Is she holding the baby?
I can't remember.
I think she's holding the baby. She's barefoot. It's snowing. This is up in Idaho, like really tall snow. She runs through the snow barefoot with no coat or anything on to his parents' house, crying, asking for help, and they're like, "Well, we better have a talk with them, and we're gonna be very stern with them and tell them this isn't appropriate behavior." I mean, this is like crazy. And of course, when they talk to him, it's like a little slap on the wrist, like, "Well, what's wrong, Sean? What's going on, Sean? Why would you do that to your wife, Sean?" It's crazy.
You know what they say? Denial ain't just a river in Egypt.
No, major denial.
I mean, you talk about a family who is totally in denial and I don't even know what to say. It just absolutely amazes me.
I just can't imagine. Even it doesn't matter how much I love one of my children. If I saw them abusing another one of my children, I could not turn a blind eye to it.
Now here's the clincher. Okay, Audrey, who was abused all those years before Tara ever was, writes a letter to Tara while she's in college and says Sean has been, quote, saved by God and is now absolved of his sins.
Yeah.
Okay. I get that. I believe that God forgives us of our sins, but as we find out later in the story, he really hadn't changed his stripes.
I just think he said what people wanted to hear.
Once they all agree, so the parents and Audrey and the wife, they're all saying that, he's absolved by God, whatever. Now they all believe, because Tara isn't so quick to forgive him, which is understandable.
Right.
Because she's not so quick to accept him and forgive him, they all believe that she has been overtaken by the devil. And then September, she's now, we haven't gotten to this part yet, but she actually goes from Cambridge to Harvard. Okay, so now she's at Harvard.
Working on a PhD. Got
Working on a
girl who's
PhD.
only been to school a few months of her
Right.
life and has made it all the way up through a bachelor's, a master's, and now working on her PhD.
Yes,
which
this is all from a girl
tough.
who grew up on a scrapyard in Idaho with a few
why
books
the
in
book's
her
so fascinating.
basement.
To me, that's why the book's so fascinating. You go
Yeah.
from someone who has no education to earning a PhD from an Ivy League college.
So basically, in this part, I could not wrap my head around it. So her parents come to visit her at Harvard, and they stay with her in her dorm
instead
room.
of getting a hotel,
They refuse to get a hotel.
they
and
stay in her room.
And she said at one point it would have absolutely devastated her to have her dad run it, but she said here he was going to the communal bathroom, wearing a towel, and I was just cracking up. I thought, well, a lot of these people at Harvard, that might
And
not
at
have seemed like
this
such a
point,
strange thing to them.
I guess, but at this point, they're actually making money. I'm like, why didn't they get a? I think it was
part of their beliefs.
The whole point of them being there was they were going to give her one final chance.
Oh, yeah, they were on a pilgrimage or a
they
mission.
felt like she was possessed by Satan.
Yeah,
and
the dad
save her.
So they take her out to. There's a place in somewhere near Harvard that they consider that Mormons consider sacred, I believe, and I can't. It's in here somewhere, but I don't remember. Oh, it's called the Sacred Grove in Palmyra, New York, and they take her there, and they're hoping to revert her and hoping she'll come back home and become the old Tara she used to be, because she's getting worldly, and all that, and she doesn't embrace or listen, or she doesn't. They want her. Basically, it's almost like they're saying, admit that
you've lied and
admit that you no longer have the same beliefs we do, that you're a heathen now. They want her to admit that she's fallen away from God.
Yes.
And so she refuses to do it. Well, the dad eventually is like, well, I feel an evil presence in this room, and they say they have to leave, and they basically just run out because they're so uncomfortable there. They feel like she's literally in bed with the devil. Okay, so this is the sad part, really. So she returns to, after that encounter with her parents, she experiences a nervous breakdown. And it's funny because after I was reading the summary of the book, it says, that she had a nervous breakdown. Well, I didn't realize she had a nervous breakdown, but I should have known that because...
Yeah, and it's almost like she had PTSD because she had been through so many traumatic experiences physically and mentally.
I'm just saying it's weird that it took them saying nervous breakdown for me to realize, duh, Angie, because... everything she described was someone having a nervous breakdown.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so she would have night terrors. She would wake up and just be screaming.
She would wake up in the middle of the street sometimes. It was like she would be in her dorm and then she would wake up in the middle of the street, like outside of her dorm. I mean, she actually was doing things I've read that soldiers do after war.
Yeah.
And it's because she had been through so many traumatic experiences.
Right. So basically, she almost fails to get her PhD because she's having this nervous breakdown and she's not working on her, the things that she's supposed to be doing. But once she gets counseling, that's when things start turning around. She actually finds a counselor. And I think she might have been very reluctant to go at first.
Yeah.
But once she finds it, things start turning around for her.
Right. It finally showed her reality had been warped for so long. Mm-hmm. Once someone actually started pointing out, that's not normal. Those are not normal. Your parents aren't normal. That situation's not normal. Your life's not normal. And she started to see things from a different perspective. That's when she started to heal.
Through her education, through her classes, and her dissertation is on Mormonism.
Yes.
So once she starts seeing things from an outside perspective and she's out of her bubble and she starts learning knowledge of how the world works and she sees that a lot of things her dad told her of her life were lies, she now can look at everything with a new perspective and she actually goes back home to her grandmother's funeral. But unfortunately, even though she tries to reconcile with her family, she's still estranged because none of them, they all look at her as if, well, she never has repented.
And I think to this day, she's estranged from not every member, but most of her family.
Yeah. So basically, the memoir it ended with basically she recognized that her past self and her present self. She realized it's almost like she's two different people now. And she realized I'm just going to read this last part. It says, she realizes she can still coexist despite the alienation from her family. But most importantly, Tara credits her formal and informal education for allowing her to grow into the scholar and citizen she is today. So we're going to close now, but I just wanted to ask you, did this story change your perception of education and its importance, and if so, how?
Yeah, I think I've just always taken for granted, well, everybody gets educated here in the United States, but not necessarily. And just because people say they are homeschooling doesn't necessarily mean that they are doing what they say they are. And so all the things we take for granted, like she had never even heard of the Holocaust. When she got to college, she had never even heard of the Holocaust. Just things we take for granted that everybody should know, she didn't know. But yeah, it does change. It just makes me realize how important education is as far as having a general understanding of the world's history, general understanding of just, I don't know, life in general.
Well, and if you're living in a toxic home like that, and you never hear any outside perspectives, how do you know that there is anything else other than that?
All you know is what you've been told.
All you know is what you've been told. But it's like we were talking earlier before the podcast. I said that old adage. All my life I've heard people say, "Oh, it's so important that you get an education," but it never really occurred to me why it's important you get an education.
Right. I always think of it in terms of
help
career,
you get a job.
Yes. Well, you have to be educated to get a job, but it's not just that.
You just hit what I was. It just came to me what I've been thinking, but it just kind of came to my mind when you said that. To me, education was always about just helping you make it through life. I can balance a checkbook. I can do basic math. I can read, I can write, but it just never hit me that it's a revelation of there's more out there than what I see.
Yeah, it exposes you to other cultures, other ways of thinking.
Yes, I took an anthropology class and a geography class, and both of them were very eye-opening. I mean, it just makes you realize sometimes we really do just live in a little bubble.
Yeah.
And education is just something that kind of pops that bubble and helps us get us out.
And I just think we take it for granted here in the United States. I always think about Africa, some of these countries. You have to pay for your uniform. You have to pay for your books. And a lot of people don't go to school because they can't afford the tuition. They can't afford the uniform. They can't afford the books. Where everything's free here in the United States. Public schools are free. And I get really frustrated whenever I see, especially our students, just take that for granted. And I wish, honestly, I wish they could read books like these or visit another country and go, oh, I really have it made. I'm very blessed. I think it takes a different perspective and being exposed to different cultures to truly appreciate what we have here.
Now, I can't really think of a good word rating for this book. I forgot to think of one prior, but how many, let's see, what would be a good...
I know, I almost said...
Tara, let's see...
Yeah, we don't have a rating word, do we?
No, we'll just have to go to the generic stars. How many stars would you give this book?
Okay, well, now that I've changed my view on that doesn't have to be a life changer to be a 5, I'm going to go ahead and give this book a 5.
Okay. I'm going to give it a 4.5, and the only reason is because, like any other autobiography or memoir, there's... some people say some of her stories don't add up or whatever, and I'm not saying I doubt her at all. I'm not saying that at all. But to me, it was about a 4.5. There was but I got to be honest with you. She's so smart. There were some passages in there that were a little over my head. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Like if you had that experience.
Yeah, there were a few things that she said that I'm like, the way it was worded was a little confusing, and I wasn't quite sure exactly what she was trying to say. But that was maybe 2 or 3 times.
I almost felt her intelligence, the way she wrote some of it I was like, wow, that was very intelligent, but I don't know what you meant by that.
Well, and she said she had to learn how to write a novel. She's so used to academic writing that she had to teach herself and had to have other people help her learn how to write like a memoir.
I could see that.
So I thought, to me, it was an excellent book. I highly recommend it. It was, I hate to say it was entertaining because I hate someone else's tragedy. It was entertainment for me. But it was very intriguing, and just to see her story, and it ended on a positive and negative note. The positive is she got out of the abusive situation. She now has a PhD. She's now can be productive and happy.
She seems almost pretty famous. You can
she's been on
Google
Oprah,
her, and she's
CNN.
been all over the place.
Yeah, she's been on every major news station, every major talk show. But the negative is she can't. She's estranged from her family. And her
so
mom
it's almost
and dad,
like
her mom even wrote a counter book.
That's what I was getting ready to ask you. I actually want to close with that. I was going to mention,
which I thought that was funny.
So her mom writes a book to basically discredit everything that she said. You know, like none of this is true.
Yeah, they did get an education, and she wasn't.
Oh, and I love how her dad, all through the book, would say, "See, I told you our homeschooling worked. How else would you get that on the ACT, and how else would you get into Harvard?"
Yeah, the dad takes credit for.
He takes credit,
even though he was always saying he didn't want them going to school.
He's against.
He's very anti-education. Very anti-education.
But yet, when she got into Harvard and Brigham Young, it was all, I told you our homeschooling worked.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah.
How else would they have got those scores in the ACT? We have wonderful homeschooling.
Right.
Yeah, that was funny.
So I'm just curious, would you read the book that the mother wrote?
I think I would just cringe at everything she said. Just knowing how she sat and watched her daughter be... so many times she sat and watched her daughter be abused and just turned a blind eye. It just makes me so angry.
And Tara, through the book, she talks about just trying to come to terms with the fact that her own mother would not protect her in these situations.
And
I have
so
to agree
hurtful.
That I just can't even imagine.
Yeah, I think I would cringe through. I want someone just to sit down and go. So basically, basically what I think the book boils down to is her saying, no, it's nothing like she said. I don't think she denied that some stuff went on, but not
the mother's book.
The mother's book, not nearly as bad as Tara said. And she goes into how she raised her kids and how she educated them, and then there's supposedly.
It sounds like you've read a summary.
I did.
Okay.
I have.
Do you know the name of it?
No.
Okay.
And she also goes into a lot about her herbs and essential oils and how her business got started and what the properties of each. So just knowing that what type of person she is, no, I don't think I could ever read that book. Could you read it?
I just would like to read some of it just to see. Her mom sounds like a nutcake to me.
I just think she's been so brainwashed by the husband.
Mm-hmm. And I one thing I think would be really interesting to get into is religion and how easy it is to become brainwashed through religion.
Yeah.
And we're religious people, don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying there's just a fine line sometimes between a cult and religion.
And true. Yeah.
All right, well, anything else you want to say before we close?
No, I just really enjoyed the book, and
I would highly recommend it. And like I said, we both agree it was one of those books that we could not quit listening to because it was so fascinating.
Very fascinating.
Very fascinating. So, all right, well, I think our next podcast we're going to do a Little White Lies. That's going to be a fun one.
It's going to be fun because it was a fun read.
It was funny book. I loved it. Can't wait to talk about it.
I can't either. It was a good one.
All right, well, until next time, this is Angie.
This is Joy.
And I messed that one up, didn't I?
That's okay. We'll try it again. We'll see you next time on
Twin Talk.